Thank you very much for coming for this new workshop here at Le Wagon. We are very pleased to host a new workshop with Martin Daniel, who came from the United States. So we took this opportunity to invite him, as he works in San Francisco. So he will share with you his experience at Airbnb in the data science team. Martin Daniel, he's also the one who created the data science on-demand class that we have online. So he will be able to tell you a few words also about this course. And thank you again for being here. And I'll let you the mic.
Thanks so much, Edouard. Thanks so much. Wow, I'm so impressed. Like so many people are interested in data. I mean, that's pretty cool. So my name is Martin. As you can guess from my accent, I'm actually French, and I'm going to speak in English, which is weird. But this is thanks to Le Wagon, and as they are scaling like internationally, they want to get some English content. So good for you guys. As Edouard told, I'm a data scientist at Airbnb. I started there like 2 years ago. And I'm pretty excited about this company and the work we do in the data science team. And I just wanted to give you a few insights of how we structure the company, how we structure the data team, what do we do exactly, and what kind of tools we built to really scale our work at Airbnb. We can do 45 minutes of presentation. I can go faster or slower, depending on what you want. And then we can move to a Q&A, so 15, 20 minutes, and then we can get beers, and we can get to know each other. So three parts, very simply. I can start with a short introduction about what is Airbnb, how they got started, and how the data science team actually started, and what do we do exactly. I want to expose what do we do in 3 simple cases, so just to show you the kind of work we can do. And then I want to move to the last parts, and the last parts are the tools. So the tools that we built, mostly open source tool that you can use for your own business, or you can actually, if you're a developer, you can actually work on to really scale the work of the data science team. So just a few words about me. I call myself an accidental data scientist. I graduated from a business school, actually just next door from ESCP Europe a few years ago. I did a major there in economics and entrepreneurship, and then I did my internship at Google, where I was working for YouTube mostly, and I met a few guys there that were running Google in Europe, so the managing director of Google in Europe, and I joined them in a company called 55, and 55 was the first kind of data agency, so helping the good practices that those guys learned from Google and implement them for other big companies. And I stayed few years there, where I led and I hired the data science team. And then I moved to Silicon Valley and I joined Airbnb as a data scientist. And I got pretty lucky in my career because I kind of started where this boom of the data science team really kind of started. So this is a graph showing you the kind of hype, but this is the Google Trends screenshot of the keyword data scientists on Google in the US, in the UK, and in France. And you can see that it kind of really started in the US back in 2011. And then, the UK and France kind of, follow along in 2013 or something like this. And now, this job is becoming a real, as this kind of reality in terms of, jobs and salary, etc. But it was nothing before, and so this is really something kind of new. As Edouard mentioned, I also have a class online that you can use, so it's in French, and I kind of packed all my kind of knowledge in terms of data science. It's at ondemand.lewagon.com, ondemand.lewagon.com, and you can learn a few things about Python and then analyzing your own data using the kind of modern tools we are using at Airbnb. All right, so let's get back to the company and Airbnb. So who never heard of Airbnb before? All right, so it's gonna make things very, very, very easy. So Airbnb, as you know, is this massive community of hosts that was started back in 2007. And I don't know if you know the story of how it got started, but this company was started by those 3 guys. So you have Joe, Brian, and Nate, and the story is Brian and Joe actually met in RISD. RISD is a design school in Rhode Island, so on the east coast of the US. And they really decided to kind of start a company together. And they moved to Silicon Valley, and so they moved to San Francisco in this flat. And so this flat is Rush Street, so in the middle of San Francisco. And as any kind of entrepreneur, in San Francisco, they had no money. They had no money, and they had to pay the rent in one of the most expensive cities that you have worldwide. And so while they were thinking about their ideas, they came with this kind of sneak hack of making a bit of money. And at the time, so back in 2007, there was a big design conference in San Francisco, and all the hotels were sold out. And so they decided to put like a hair mattress. So a hair mattress in their living room to just welcome people and get a bit of money to pay the rent. That was the initial idea. And as they were working on other kind of startup ideas, this is really how they get like the first money and how they got started. And so they put like a kind of website. So this is, not sure if you can see well here, but this is the kind of initial website of Airbnb at the time. So you can see it's pretty different. So very simple website where you could actually see the kind of properties that they had, and you could connect and you could find the property. But what happened is it's exactly the same thing as when you start any company. I don't know if anybody in the audience kind of started a project, but when you start a project and you put a website out there, well, nothing happened. Basically, right? Nothing happened. You just you put something there, you build something, you think it's going to be in the words, but nothing really happened. And it was exactly the same thing as at Airbnb. There is a very good talk from Joe Gebbia at Startup School, where he shows the Google Analytics of Airbnb since the beginning, right? And it took them 4 years to really get started. So the traction became 4 years after. But at the very beginning, that was very, very empty. And so they decide to join an incubator. And so this incubator is the Y Combinator, a prestigious incubator in the Silicon Valley. That was started by this guy, Paul Graham. And Paul Graham has different advice for them. And one of the advice is very simple, talk to your users. Right? Like the website is not taking off. Try to understand what's happening, how do people are actually using the product, and go on the tour and meet with your users. And meet with their users. And so this is what they did. And they went on a tour. They went on the tour in the US. So we are back in 2008. Went on a tour, went to New York, went to different cities. And they meet with their hosts. So the actual people that were using the platform at the beginning. And as they were talking to the hosts, they realized a few things, few key moments that really struck them in the way that the disconnect they had between what they were imagining, in their heads, and what actually people were doing with the product. A few examples. The first thing is the payments. The payments. Let's say back in the days, at Airbnb, you would get into the room as a guest. So we get into the listing. When do you pay? At the beginning? At the end? How do you pay? Do you give cash? Can I take credit cards? Can I take check? So payment is very awkward. You don't know exactly what to do, you don't know exactly what to pay, etc. So, payments is one of the first things they realize. Another thing they realize, and it's pretty funny, when you look at this, right now, is you didn't need to be in the flats, so in the apartments, to rent on Airbnb. And there is this funny story where they met this musician, so a New York musician that was touring. So he was actually outside of his apartment, and he was renting his apartment on Airbnb while he was touring. And so they just realized, we don't need to be inside the flat. You don't need for hosts to be inside the flat while welcoming the guests. So those few things are very interesting because they are the kind of feedback you get from the users, and they actually build those feedbacks into the products. And this is one of the explanations of this, which is this massive growth that Airbnb kind of got from, since back 2010 to what we have, nowadays. So this is the cumulative guest arrivals on Airbnb, on the platforms. And we just reached last year about 150 million guest arrivals. So just guests using the product, and booking a room on Airbnb. And so this massive growth, so one of the explanation is this kind of taking the feedbacks and understanding what the user wants and then building back in the product. And the reason I'm telling you this is because the way the data science team at Airbnb is working is actually pretty similar. So that's the exact same idea. But the only difference is like, you cannot actually go to your users and talk to every one of them when you have like 150 million, right? You need to find like a way to scale this. You need to find a way to scale the way you are listening to your users. And the way to do this is really analyzing data. So just like, taking all the data that people let on the website, taking this, and then trying to build the products that make your service even better, right? And we have a lot of data, because we have a lot of people, a lot of users, so we have a lot of data in the product. So we have 1 billion events logged every day on the platform. We have 18 petabytes of data in HDFS. So HDFS is this big box where we just like store all our data. And we have roughly 150 people working in the data science team and the data infrastructure. So we are 100 data scientists and then 50 people working on data engineering on the data infrastructure at Airbnb. And our job is really this, like really trying to do what they did in the early days by listening to your users, being the voice of the customers and trying to understand what we can bring on the product. We have a world-class team of very, very different people from very different backgrounds. So you have academia, you have people from physics, you have people from economics, people from social science, hard science. We have like professional poker game like player. I mean, we have you name it. So from very different countries, India, China, Chile. I'm just looking at them. Yeah, what else? Puerto Rico. Anyway, so many different people coming at Airbnb and a team strong of like 100 data scientists. And the way we are organized is actually interesting because it's very different from the way other companies, such as for instance Facebook, is organized. So we are what we call embedded, right? So the way we are working is we are working this cross-functional team, very small, very nimble, that is fully autonomous on this area of work. So I showed you like on the slide here, my team, right? And so in my team you have Kevin, Cookie, Sukada, Evelyn, Yuntao, and Niha. And those folks are from different functions of the organization. So you have like one product manager, you have engineers, researcher, data scientists, and designers, right? And so they make this kind of a cornerstone, like this core team that works on the different problems. And the way we are structuring the work is every year you have different outcomes, different priorities from the company that are guided by the board, and we are working into those like sub-teams on all of those companies. But this structure is very important to the way we are embedded as the team. All right, so what do we do exactly? Three things, mostly, three things. The first one is really analysis. So it's looking at the data, taking like all the data that we know, and trying to inform the strategy of the product team. Trying to understand, like, should you build this? Where should you build it? Should you ship this? Like, this kind of analysis that we do. The other second part that is very important is experimentations. So this is all the fields of what we call causal inference. So you have this like all the A/B tests, all those things where once you have decided that you want to launch like a feature, you want to test it. So you want to experiment on this, you want to try to understand if this is like a positive impact on a company, try to understand the causality of things, and ultimately ship it. And the last thing is what we call data products. So data products, those are the things where you try to automate things. So this is mostly machine learning or pipeline that try to automate different things you can have in a company. And I'm going to give you one example for those three pieces, all right? Those are examples of like my experience. You can have many different experience as data scientists at Airbnb, as you can imagine, but I'm just going to give you like few interesting examples. I also want to call out that at the end of this presentation, I give you like links because all the work we do, all the tools we build, we open source them or we just like publish them. So you can have you have a lot of content online that I'm going to show you. All right. So first example, the case of like one analysis and just like one analysis I had to do. The question was the following. The question is like, I have X amount of dollars I want to invest to increase my supply, right? In which markets should I invest? So this is a pretty simple question coming from a team at Airbnb. So again, Airbnb is this marketplace that's matching supply and demand. And you want to know in which markets should you prioritize your work. And so this is definitely something where data science can help. But just to answer this question, you need to understand the kind of dynamics you have in terms of the marketplace. So you have to come up with some kind of framework to think about the dynamics of supply and demand, right? Like where should you put like one unit of supply, one incremental unit of supply to get the maximum return? And so one way to think about this is using an econometrics model. So pretty simple relationship between the bookings, the number of bookings, the supply, which is given here by S, multiplied by the demand, and you multiply this by a coefficient. And this coefficient is A. And this coefficient is basically what we call a matching efficiency parameter. So it's pretty simple relationship. What you can do from this framework is you can use all the historical data you have for every market and for every week, month or so, and you can fit and you can get those coefficients. So you can get A, you can get alpha, and you can get gamma. And just to give you an idea, like an intuition of like what A is, for instance, in this equation, A is the friction between supply and demand. It's the ability for a market to transform like the same amount of supply and demand into bookings. So let me give you like one example. If A is very small, that means that there is a lot of friction into turning some demand and supply into number of bookings. If A is very high, that means it's very easy, it's very free to actually transform like some supply and demand. So let's take an example. Venice. Venice is a small market, very small market. Everybody wants to go to Venice. If you add 1 unit of supply in Venice, it's going to be converted like immediately because everybody wants to stay in Venice, right? So the coefficient is going to be very high. In other markets, I'm going to take like Las Vegas, for instance. Las Vegas is interesting. There's a lot of hotels, right? All the hotels are near the strip, right? And everybody wants to stay in the strip. So the matching coefficient is very low because it's actually very hard to transform like some supply and demand into incremental bookings, right? So you take this model and you fit this on the historical values of all Airbnb, right? And from there it's very powerful because from there you can get like a lot of interesting insight. You know, one first insight you can get is this. So basically this is just like an index of like the supply constraints. Like how constrained is your supply in a specific market, right? And you can plot this for on a time period. So let's take an example. The Cannes, Cannes in France during the Cannes festival, the supply constraints during the Cannes festival is very high, right? Because like the probability that a unit of supply is going to be converted into bookings is very high because everybody wants to stay in Cannes, right? So from there, you see where I'm going. Like, once you have this, then you can go to your team and can say, look, like in this market, at this specific of time, if you add like 1 unit of supply, it's going to turn into like, many more bookings. So you should go into this. But you can go a step further, and what you can say is you can actually compute the return for 1 year for 1 unit of supply in one market. And this is very useful because from there what you can do is you can say, all right, if I invest 1 unit of supply in Cannes, I'm going to compute the number of nights this is going to return for the whole year. And you can rank those markets like from there. You can take like all those markets and you can actually infer like in which markets you should invest, right? And so this is one example of how you answer like the question that was asked before, where you should invest, right? And you have like some like actionable data you can use to really guide the investments of your company in a very smart way, in a very data-driven way. All right? So this is one example of using some data to answer the question that somebody is asking you. Case two. Case two are experiments. We do experiments all the time. Right? We just keep our time experimenting. There is a Medium blog post about like the infrastructure of how we built our framework to think about experiments. And experiments are very, very, very important. The reason is the following. Let's say you have a feature, right? So you have a new feature you're thinking of, and you launch the feature, right? So you launch the feature here in May, and then you look at a graph of like the bookings, and you see there is an increase of bookings, right? What do you conclude? What do you say? Should you ship? Should you wait? Who wants to ship this feature? Okay. Who wants to hold off? Like, we don't ship this feature. Okay. Who have no idea? Okay, cool. So, yeah, I mean, I would say the last group, right? I would say I have no idea, right? Because like you don't know what the world actually looks like with or without the feature, right? The whole idea is like you want to know if the bookings are increasing if you launch the feature or if you don't launch the feature, right? Maybe that was like due to like some seasonality, and maybe you were like in Cannes and you were this like Cannes festival, and just like the booking just like exploded, right? And so you need to this kind of key concept, which is like the causality, like the causality of the feature on the target metric you are tracking. And in this case, like this is the number of bookings. So you want to have this kind of word where you have the word with the feature and the word without the feature. And then you want to compare the performance of the website with or without the feature, right? So this is extremely important to do this, because without that, you have no idea like what this feature is actually doing on the product. It's really hard. So experiment, do experimentation. So I checked this morning, we have 400, like roughly 400 experiments running right now. Chances are that if you are logging on Airbnb, at some point you're going to be part of some experiments, and at least like a high number of experiments. We are experimenting all the time. Any button we are launching, any tweak we do on the search algorithm, we experiment just like all the time. One very simple example, again, like you can experiment on like very simple things, and then you can experiment on like much more complicated things. So this is an example of like the homepage. So again, like I want to attract more people to host on the platform, right? And I can do like a very simple example here, where the word is like without the feature, so on the right side, and the word with the feature, which is like a small banner saying like hey, host. Because hosting is cool, like hosting is sexy, and then you can click and then you can list your space, right? And what you can do here is like you can see the word with or without the feature by doing like a 50-50 experiment. So some of your audience is going to see the feature, some of them are not going to see the feature, and then you just like compare the results, right? Pretty simple. So what's the job of the data scientist here? Like a few things. One is like the first question you want to answer is, for how long do you need to run this experiment, right? And so this is what we call power analysis. And so here, this is a graph of like what we call the minimum detectable effect. So what is the % change you need to get between the control and the treatment? So again, the word with or without the feature, before making any conclusion, before reaching what we call the statistically significance. So that could be one analysis. Another one is just like analyzing the results and just like trying to translate what is the influence, what is the causality of this experiment on the number of bookings, right? Like what's exactly does this experiment is actually bringing? Which is something pretty cool to do, because like without this, you have no idea like is your team is actually impacting the business or not, right? So you need to have this kind of experiments to make sure to get like the accounting of your team. Right. All right, so that was the part of the experiments. I can share like more of this abstract. So you get it. So there is like analysis. I showed you like the marginal return, which is like one thing about like doing analysis. Next thing was experiments. So just like doing basic A/B test to understand like the causality of things. And then the last thing is what we call data product. Right? So data products are the kind of algorithm or machine learning you can put in place to automate, or just like trying to do like more things that you can do in the company. And I'm going to take you like one personal example, so something I built on the last few months. And just to introduce you, I'm going to introduce you this. So I'm not sure how many people know this, but when I started at Airbnb, I started in the cities team. So there was the team responsible to work with cities. We are working in 36,000 cities worldwide to make sure that hosting on Airbnb is actually legal. It's actually enforced for every city, and so we work with every city official to make sure that Airbnb is actually legitimized in every city we are operating on. And so one thing we introduced very recently, this is like an article from The Guardian in December 2016, is a night cap. Right? So a night cap is a system that is going to block you if you, just like a few things on that, the legal aspect. You're allowed to do whatever you want on Airbnb, but you have to, after a certain threshold, so a certain number of nights you are hosting on Airbnb, you're becoming not just like a sometimes host, you're becoming like a professional host, right? And this limit is going to vary depending on the market. right? So it's going to be like 120 days in Paris. It's going to be 90 days in London, 90 days in Amsterdam, 90 days in San Francisco. So it varies depending on the city. And so this is like the city official that says, all right, I'm going to set the limit at this point because after this is like becoming a different type of hosting. So we introduced a tool with London, the city of London, that is going to block the number of days that you can have that you can host on Airbnb. And if you want to host more, then you can just like ask the city and just like make the the paperwork to become like a professional host, right? And so this is something we announced with the city of London. And so one thing that happened while we were doing this was this. It's like you can block people, but then people can basically create a new account and put a new listing, right? Like, what about, my name is Martin, but then I can create like a new account, and my name is Bob. And then on Bob, I'm going to create the same account, the same listing, and just like under this other kind of account, then I can just like host, right? And the limit doesn't appear. And when you block me again, they can just like create a new account, right? And just get kind of a like mouse and cats kind of game, right? And so to tackle this, and so this is like a real case, like example of like, June 2016, then the listing was removed from the platform, and then it appears on the different accounts as a different listing. And so to tackle this, I created this tool called Jumeaux. So Jumeaux means twins in French, as we'll get. And so Jumeaux is just like a way to identify the twins. So it's just like trying to guess if like one listing has a twins, or evil twin. And if so, then we just like catch this duplicate listing, and we pass this to an agent that's going to remove again the listing, right? So it's pretty simple, and just like it's a tool that is going to work like this. So for every newly created listing in a market, I'm going to predict if this listing has a twin or doesn't have a twin, right? And if this twin was previously removed from the platform, then we can take this listing again down from the platform. And the nice thing with Jumeaux is that it's actually done by, so the takedown is actually made by the quality team. So there is like people actually taking down the listing. And as they are taking down some listings, they are giving more and more data on what is a true or a false positive pair of listings. So as the tool kind of works, like you get like more and more data to get a better classifier. And so, this kind of data product is it's a very simple example of like, and we have data products for every step of like the process. We have this for like the pricing, the search, the payment teams, etc. But I think there is like this interesting kind of analogy. I don't know how many people know this analogy of like the condor and the bicycle. Right, at least we get like one story. We'll learn like one story tonight. So there was like an analogy from Steve Jobs, actually, in those like hidden interviews that he made, where he was talking about the condor and the bicycle. So let me tell you a story. So the story goes like this: if you do a study of like all the species, the living species on Earth, right, and you study the locomotion, which is the amount of energy they have to spend to go from point A to point B, right? So how much energy do they take to go from point A to point B, right? The most efficient animal we have on Earth that goes from point A to point B in a very efficient manner is the condor. The condor is like, two wings like and just go from point A to point B in a very, very efficient way. The human being, us, we just suck about this. Like we are really bad. Like we spend a lot of energy going from point A to point B. We spend a lot of calories, doing this. But then if you do the same study, and you equip the human being with a bicycle, the human being beats the condor. Like we spend less energy going from point A to point B with the bicycle than the condor. Isn't that amazing? Like, isn't that crazy? And the moral of the story is just like, we are tool builder. Like what we do is we build tools to increase our productivity. This is like what we are good at. And I think like, Jumeaux was just like one illustration of this. Of just like building tools to really increase the productivity of your team. Because there is no way that your team is going to look for all those listings created in a market and just compare those listings to all the listings we have to find the twins they have in the data. And this is a good segue on the last section. And the last section are about tools. So the tools that we build at Airbnb, we mostly open source them so you can actually use them. There are many tools that we build, and I'm going to present like a few of those. And And those tools really scale. They are like the kind of bicycle for us to make our work, easier and faster. All those tools, you can find them on Airbnb.io, right? Airbnb.io. And you have tools from the engineering team, from the data science team. All those tools are on this website. I'm going to present 3 tools, tonight, but I would be like more than happy to go through like many more tools because like they are all awesome. But yeah, so I want to start with like one problem we had as data scientists at Airbnb and how we actually solved it. And the problem we had was the languages. So the different languages that we use as data scientists, like you could use R, you could use Python, and that was like pretty divided. And so we did like a survey. So this is like a survey of the kind of tools that data scientists were using at Airbnb. We are mostly using R, but we have also like a good Python community. Like some people are using both. So kind of varies. And we use those for like a very different use case. As I kind of described earlier, we use those for like product insights. So really just like going into exploratory and trying to answer like a question. So such as the one I presented earlier. We can do experimentation. So again, as I presented, or you can do some kind of modeling. And again, there is like many more use cases you can find online. And when you do this, you often use the same functions. You often use the same kind of work, as data scientists. And so if you want your team to really scale and not like reinvent the wheel, we built those packages. So we have like 2 packages, very simple packages in R. So Airbnb and AirPy. Just like excuse the poor naming, but yeah, but those are the packages we use. And so when you start at Airbnb in the data science team, you can load those packages, and you have like all the functions to just like do like all the work that previous data scientists built for you. So for instance, one very simple thing that we do is a consistent API to access remote data, and this is very, very useful. So it means like. What I'm showing you here is library, Airbnb, so I'm just like importing the library in R, and then I can access my data by like doing presto get, and then I can do a query and just like query all the data that is on the cluster. And it's something that's actually very useful because 1, you have a consistent way across the company to access the data, this is 1, and then 2, everybody can reproduce this, right? Everybody can actually get your code and then rerun it, and it's going to be the same code for everybody. Right? So this is the same way for everybody to access the same data. I won't go into more details. Like if you're more interested, like we can talk more after this. But we're just like we have like all those like awesome packages inside this, including for instance like branded visualization, so branded themes that are specific for Airbnb, using ggplot, a pretty awesome visualization library. And so this is the first step, like those like having a standardized way of accessing the data and then doing visualization is the first way into answering what we call the knowledge problem. And so this is a tool I'm pretty excited about. It's pretty simple, but very effective for us. And the problem that is really answering is the following. As data scientists, when you work, you're often going to share your knowledge in very different formats. Right? It could be like a like PowerPoint presentation, it could be like an Excel file, it could be like an email, it could be a Google Doc, it could be like any kind of work that you're going to share, right? The problem with this is like it's in very different formats, and it's often really hard to actually search. So you cannot go back in time, you cannot see exactly the kind of work. It's hard to reproduce, so it's really hard to actually rerun analysis, as we did before. So we found a way that's really to really standardize this, and I think like any company, any company or I actually think there's a business just like taking this product and just like implementing it like for their companies because it's really awesome. And so the way it works is just like we have one repository and one repository that can welcome a knowledge post, right? And so a knowledge post is basically a combination of like a blog post, very inspired by academic journal, and a source code. And so those are very important. So basically, it's a post where you have all the source code that leads to analysis, and it comes like this. So as very like simple interface. So you have a web interface. You can search for previous posts. That means like if you have an ID, if you want to do something like a new project, you can just like type as anybody would log into vacation rental, for instance, and then you can look for previous analysis. You have tags. So it looks like a very, very simple kind of blog post, but it's really, really important for us because it lets you do two things. The first one is you can have what we call peer reviews, right? So you do a post, and then you have other folks at the company that are going to peer review your work the same way as you do this in academia, right? In academia, you need to have peer reviews before actually being published in a journal, right? This is exactly the same thing. So this is the first thing. And the second thing is, then you don't need to rebuild the wheel. Like all the work is already there, and then you can build on this existing work and then advancing the kind of knowledge of the company. So we have 1,000 posts approximately right now, and we have 300 weekly active users. So of course, only from Airbnb folks, and this is for everybody. So this is for product managers, this is for analysts, or for marketing people. So anybody can access and see the previous knowledge that was done by the company. And it's really very simple tool, but very, very effective in scaling the knowledge of the company. And it's open. So we are reaching, I think we are more at 2,000 stars on GitHub right now. But yeah, it's open, and you can contribute to this beautiful knowledge repo. All right, the last tool I want to present is called Superset, and Superset is a pretty exciting tool as well. It lets you do a few things, so explore data, create interactive dashboards, and share your discovery. So the idea behind this is you can turn any database, so in any format, into a nice visualization in a very small amount of work. So you just a few clicks, then you transform into some Druid or Presto or some big data into a very nice visualization. I'm just going to go very quickly. So it's kind of similar to Tableau. I don't know if many people know Tableau software, except that it's free and open source. So we have nice visualization. You can define your own. So maps, block spots, Sankey diagram, and this. And so this is also coming with a nice SQL interface, and this is something very important at Airbnb. Everybody has access to all the data. You have one SQL editor, and then everybody can actually query the data and accessing it, and just running your own analysis. We are also coupling this with a university, internal university, a data university, where you can learn everything from Excel to advanced SQL to more advanced machine learning, and you can really learn and be empowered in your daily job. Stack, if there are developers in the room, it's a Python backend, some React on the front end, and it's open. And we are reaching 15,000 stars. I think the last one I checked. It's open, so you can use it for your own use case, or you can help us contribute on the project. And that's all for me. If you have any questions, we can spend 15 minutes, and then we can move to the beers. And also, you can follow me on Twitter at MartinDaniel4. If you want to learn more about data.
First, I wanted to thank you for this talk, and during the whole presentation you talked about the fact that you need to talk to the users, you have huge amounts of data, and good tools to monitor this. I was wondering if Airbnb has ever thought of becoming an advertising platform to propose products. For example, if I book a flight in Los Angeles, would I have an advertising for flights to LA or something like this?
So this is a good question, and I don't think that our business is actually advertising. I think Airbnb, the vision of Airbnb long term is really to become the one-stop shop platform to organize all your trips, right? And your trip is taking the flights, so we are announcing that we are going into flights. So we are going to be developing our own flight search system. It's housing, so when you arrive in place. It's recommendation. So I didn't talk about this in the talk, but we have our own data on guidebooks. I think we can really disrupt the way you get recommendations, when you're on site. And then there are experience. So, people that you're going to meet. And so we announced like a few months ago the launch of like experience where everybody can go in a city and then meet with a local and then experience like a new. So I think just to say that the business that Airbnb, the market that Airbnb is to go after is a huge market. It's the tourism market. If you think about it, like there is 1.1 billion people traveling every year. Like it's a huge market. It's the second market after oil and gas. So it's way bigger than just like the advertising business. And I think like in the vision and the way we are thinking about the company, it's much more tourism than really advertising. But yeah, so this is what I would say. Yeah, thanks for your question. So the question is like, why trusting open source? And I would go the other way. I would say like, to which extent? Okay. To which extent? I would say why trusting closed source, right? Like, I mean, why going to the other way? I mean, if you think about it, it's like open source is just like the way to go. Like, look at few examples. So I mentioned, for instance, Python or R. So that are like the languages we are using. R was started as a open source language, like in Australia, by a few, like you might know the story, by a few statistician professor. But before you have like SaaS, or you have like those proprietary kind of platforms. And I think like as the community is growing, so as you get like many more people working on a product, the product gets way better, right? And so talking about supersets, or talking about like those products, the community, so the amount of people and the amount of like working hours that you have here is actually way higher than just like the number of people that the private company can actually pay. And so I think this is where the economics of open source is actually interesting from a company perspective. Now, what I want to say is this is true, but I also think that not everything can be open source, which is like your question. And for instance, we have a good blog post. You can check on like the Medium account of Airbnb. We have a good blog post about the data infrastructure of Airbnb, and we put like a lot of thoughts into balancing the proprietary and the open source infrastructure of our work. So I would say this is some kind of iterative things. You have to try things. You have to try what works for you, and then if open source is not working, then you should go to a proprietary vendor. Yeah.
So thanks a lot for the speech. It was really nice, really interesting. So most companies you have debates which is between either build or buy. Looks like you guys are building a lot, and I was wondering whether you have framework as to when you say, all right, let's not buy for this specific project, let's just build. That's question number one. Question number two, I read in one of your articles that you still use Tableau, for instance, right? So why would you still use Tableau? Why would you have something which is perhaps kind of even better, which is built internally?
Yeah, so this is a good question, and kind of a similar to the question earlier. There is a great talk from Maxime Boschma, who is like the main developer behind Supersets, on this exact question. I'm just going to rephrase what he said. But basically, the first thing I mean, and this is like personal to our issue with Tableau. The first thing was it didn't scale very well. Like the amount of data we had and the Tableau system with like all those extracts. So you had to wasn't really working very well for us. So there was this. The database that we use, so Druid. I'm not sure if you know Druid. Druid is a pretty awesome open source project by a company called MetaMarket, and that's a vertical database. Like it's very intensive to count like events, all these kind of things. And so Druid was not supported by Tableau at the time. And so I think Maxime was just like, I want to make this work, and so he just built those products like just for Druid at the time, and then he understood like this like could become like a bigger project. So the scale like was one of the issue. The other thing is like you don't want to be dependent, especially for your data, on a third-party company for something that is so key for your business, right? And so I think this is something where we felt that we needed to create our own solution because there was too important for us. Two, and third, I think you have to make then the economics work, and so you have to think about what's the cost of like developing this ourselves, and then what's the cost of Tableau for thousands of people, right? And so when you do the math, like sometimes it's better to build it, ourselves. Also, last thing is just like it's pretty exciting project, right? So you attract like massive talent with this, so you have like very cool people that work on this project now.
You go like the project towards Jumeau. Thing that you said was that you were working on a super unsupervised models, we were using a quality team to annotate the data. So how in Airbnb do you manage to solve the biggest problem we have as a scientist? So that it's not about just having data, but it's having like data that you can use specifically like unsupervised model or unique analytic data.
Okay, so is your question about the process of doing? No, not really.
Yeah. So how do you solve this? Like, do you use people annotate themselves data?
Okay, so do you start getting the training set, right? Okay, got you. So in the case of Jumeau, yeah, so this is a very good, very interesting point. So a lot of machine learning problems we have at Airbnb actually come from the customer service, right? Like I'm not sure if people realize like the amount of tickets, the amount of like people calling Airbnb like every day, it's huge. Like there's like a shit ton of like tickets like that we have, and so this is a lot of data. So that could be one way you can start this. In the case of Jumeau, we actually had previous flags on listings that were duplicates. So this is how I got started. But really, what happened is like I created my own kind of training set. So I just like started with like annotating just like manually, doing this like for 1,000 times. If you need like a bigger sample, you can do like Amazon Mechanical Turk. We also develop our own system of like labeling. So we have a labeler, which is like a system to do like some labeling. What else? Yeah, I mean, mostly starts with like some manual classification for like supervised problems, such as that one. I have another example right now. I'm working on a problem with images. So we have a lot of images, like 250 million, something like this. So those images, there is like a lot of data inside this. And yeah, and you can do like so you can do some unsupervised, like doing some kind of deep learning with like TensorFlow, etc. We're starting like experimenting with this. But yeah, in my problem, I just like like have a small team, and you can start this. I mean, it's really easy to kind of bootstrap to start getting some data. Yeah.
In 1 week at Airbnb.
Yeah. Okay. So the first question, just like to repeat. So the first question is about what kind of processes do we have to either experiment, analyze, or build the product? Am I correct? Okay, cool. And the next question is like, how do I spend my time, right? Okay, cool. So on the first question, I think we have like you are like a cook, right? Like a data science is like a cook. Like you have a lot of tools. Like you can do like different recipes. And the question is like it really depends on like the kind of question you are asked, right? Like so if the question is like I have this problem, I want to automate this kind of pipeline and to tackle some kind of risk on Airbnb, then you're going to go into something like the third one, which is like the data product. If the question is open-ending, like I'm wondering if on Airbnb people are, I don't know, I'm just like making something up, then this is more like an analytical work. So I think it really depends on the kind of question, the kind of task you are, yeah.
And is it depending on the teams? Because, because you are teams of different
absolutely. So then the question would be about like the stakeholders. So who is asking the question? And I think like the stakeholders are the product manager is a big stakeholder because the product manager has the vision of the team, and so he wants to know. He has a ton of questions. He wants to understand like, should we build this? Like, so it could be the product manager, but it could be also engineers that wants to understand like the impact of their feature. So you have different stakeholders that really give you the questions. So yeah, and so the work is really guided away. How do I spend my time? Good question. So we have, I try to minimize the meeting. So I don't have a lot of meetings. I try to stay very focused. And I have, I would say, so we have, I mean, I think it's pretty similar to any kind of other works. But basically, we have a stand-up meeting every week with the cross-functional team. So the ones that I described earlier. We are basically defining what we are going to do on the 2-week sprint. So we are working on like a 2-week sprint, and then from there, I just like. Try to just like manage my time to just like say I'm going to spend like that much time on working on this project and just like and then when you look at like the share of time, it's I spend some time like doing some pipelines or some analytics. It really depends on like the question I'm just trying to answer. Yeah.
Hi Martin, thanks for the talk. First question is that each time that you have a product or a project, what is the order of the process you assign the project first and you go to search for your data, or your data defines the project?
Yeah, so this is a great question, and I think it's and I think it really depends. Like I think sometimes you have I have a recent example where I really well, like to answer the question, like I don't think you have a case where you actually put your lamp like in your front, and then you go in the data, and then you find like a crazy solution. I don't think this really happens like this. You know, what's happening really is like you have an idea, you have an hypothesis, and you look at the data, you try to understand what's happening, you try to see like, you know, is this true, is it not true, etc. And then you can try to frame things according to this hypothesis. I think like mostly you have to come with an idea, like you want to test whether it's true or not. And then you just like try to understand. And then the question is like, who has the hypothesis, right? Like the hypothesis could be the stakeholders, which is like what I mentioned. So it could be like the product manager, like I think that's, you know, like blah, blah, blah. And then you just like try to see in the data if it's true. Or it could be from you, right? And so often what's going to happen is like, I have an idea, I have an hypothesis, I'm just going to test it. And then I come back to my team and say, hey guys, like I think there is like a big lever here, like we should implement this because, you know, I throw in the data that, you know, we can do this. But I don't have many examples of like, I just like stumble into something where, you know, from the data itself. I'm not sure it's really possible.
Yeah. Second question, yeah. Sorry. And the second question is that do you arrive in data like garbage data that send you to nowhere? And if you arrive in this kind of data, what kind of solution did you find like to avoid for the next time?
So I'm not sure to understand. So do you mean like I start an analysis and then I don't have any conclusion? Is this...
Maybe sometimes you have data that sends you to nowhere or to,
Yeah, I mean, it happens all the time. You know, like, for instance, like, you know, when I go back to the experiments, you know, be sure that all those 400 experiments, like a lot of those are not going to be shipped. Right? Because all of those are, you know, either like neutral, so they have no impact on the business whatsoever, or they have like a negative impact on the business. So most of the work, and this is pretty frustrating, like most of your work is actually just like, you have no conclusion, or you don't know, or I'm just like, yeah, well, I don't know, I just like, no, I have no idea, or we need to collect more data, etc. So yeah, most of your time, it's really hard to find these, you know, aha moments of like, you know, I found it. So yeah.
So my question was, before you were saying that you have around 150 people in the data team. How are they organized? How do you work together?
Well, a really good question. So on those 150 people, 50 of those are on the data infrastructure. So they are responsible of the platform of the data itself. So that means like you want to get some data that's, you know, are reliable, that comes in time. And so those are responsible for those. I think there was like, in those 50 people, there was like two groups. There was really like the data infrastructure itself, where you just like, you know, work on like the, you know, ingesting all the events, like, you know, making sure all the pipelines are working. And then you have the data engineering. Data engineering is a bit different. It's more about building the right tables, making sure the data is relevant, like testing, like doing the quality assessments, etc. So you have data infrastructure, data engineering. And then you have those 100 data scientists. And so those 100 data scientists, they are organized, embedded in those product teams, right? So you have, and you can have like we have a ratio of like data scientists to engineers, and this ratio can vary. So for instance, in our case, the ratio is like 1 data scientist for like 6 engineers, mostly. But you can have a ratio of like, you have much more data scientists, many more data scientists as engineers, depending on like the data intensity of the kind of work. So, you know, like the search team, for instance, is very data intensive, and so you have a high ratio of like data scientists.
And you were speaking before about a kind of marketplace team, which works on a supply and demand equilibrium. Is it like a 90% data scientist team, or?
It's a very data intensive team, yeah. So this team is in charge of like pricing, search, booking, and so all those pieces are very, very data intensive, yeah.
How do you manage to have 400 experiments in the website? I mean, you just want to compare one features versus the feature doesn't exist. How do you manage to 400 of them?
Is your question like, do we even have 400 features that we want to ship? Is this your question?
Okay, maybe I'm not clear enough. You just want to compare with one small incremental compared to another user with this incremental which doesn't exist. So you can like test with one website with 100 features added and another user without those 100 features. You just want to test one features.
Yeah, okay. That's your point. So your point is like the intersection of the different experiments? Okay, yeah, kind of, okay. It's a complex question, and the complete answer is on this post here. So medium.com, so check Airbnb-engineering, and you can check like the full answer, but just like to answer your question, we develop our own system to do basically assignments, right? And to make sure like all the assignments that we do at experiments are not intersecting each other. And so we make sure like by complex infrastructure that this is not going to happen. I'm not going to go into much details, but you can check like the blog post for like more details. But this is a great question. Yeah.
So you mentioned that you do a lot of experiments. How do you manage to keep things equal, especially that Airbnb is a global company and that you have cultural differences and different market dynamics across the different countries?
This is a very good point. Do you know which country has the worst rating when as guest? France. Yeah, this is true. I mean, we have a like difference, like cultural differences, etc. Well, I would say the kind of the same answer. Basically, when you do an experiment, you can assign this like globally. And I would say here, like, you don't want to get in any bias, so this is why you just like randomly assign at the host level. Basically, what you can do is like, you can do like 3 types of assignments. You can do host level, you can do guest level, or you can do market level. So it really depends the kind of experiment you want to do. But then once you did like, for instance, like a host level assignment, a host level like analysis, then you have all this data is available, so you know what's this user actually seen, and then you can do like all the drill down and all the different cuts from at the market level or the region level that you want. So usually what happens is you do experiments, like generally it's global experiments, we have different things, but global experiments, and then we spend time like doing a deep dive to understand like cultural differences if we have, or you know, this kind of thing. Yeah, but most of the time you don't want to get into like a cultural like differences. This is why we just like do like global experiments. Yeah.
When you're integrating in a product team, and you're mostly doing analysis or experimentation, or said differently, what happens when you do like data projects while you're integrating in a product team, you know, like regular product team with engineers?
Yeah, so do you mean like on the data product specifically, or do you collaborate with engineers?
So you meant there were data products, which was the third aspect of data science job. Yeah. But I mean, when you're integrating the product team, in a regular product team, with engineers and designers, how do you spend your time on the data product? How independent is that from your mostly analysis and experimentation role?
So I would say it very varies depending on your role. You know, again, like I feel like some data scientists only spend their time on data product. You know, data scientists on like the pricing team, for instance, the whole pricing product, just like it's a whole data product. It's just only this. So all your job is really like to build this kind of and make it like even better. Try to understand like what's happening, doing some experiments. So again, like I would say like a data product is also like a project in itself. And in this project, you can also analyze, or you can also do experiments to really understand like what is moving the needle on this kind of project. So you know, it really depends on like the team you're working on. It could be rare, or it could be very often, depending on like where you're working.
Okay, so you mostly don't do the same both at the same time.
Sorry?
So you mostly don't do both at the same time, either experimentation and analysis or either data product.
I would say again, like so it's very different it very depends on like the role, but I would say like, you know, most of your time you do all 3. You know, all data scientists are just like doing all 3. Because like again, like let's take the pricing product for instance. If you want to understand like how the pricing product is working, you need to do some kind of experiment at some point. Right? And then you did these experiments, but then you want to analyze. So you need to do this exploratory and did like open. So I wouldn't kind of bucket. This is one illustration of like the kind of work we do, but I wouldn't like bucket them into like very you know, isolated kind of work. It's often like a mix of all the things.
I wonder if you could share some example with us when it comes to non-supervised learning. If you do it at Airbnb, and what is it about?
what do I have? So unsupervised learning. Yeah, so unsupervised learning, it's a lot of, good question. So it could be a lot of clustering. So clustering of, for instance, like trying to find the different segments you can have on, in your population. So that could be one. Unsupervised learning for a lot of like around NLP, so natural language processing, especially for the tickets. Right? The tickets is like all these inbound tickets that we have. Like there is a lot of work to try to understand, like in which kind of category is this? Can I reply automatically? Can I find exactly the kind of work? Like it's a pretty complex kind of topic. So I would say this, and then the third one would be around images. So images would be, all you can do, like all you can imagine around images. That could be around trying to see like which image is actually the best one, that kind of stuff.
Are you using the Google API for this? Or
Sorry?
Are you using the Google API?
So we are actually building one tool ourselves, and So we announced like recently the launch of like the AI lab, which is like our own internal kind of research artificial intelligence lab, and we have exciting work coming. Cannot share now, but yeah.
So on your team slide, there is a research person.
Yeah.
What does she do?
Very good question. So yeah, indeed, there is a so is data science is the part of the quantitative research. Research is the qualitative research. So research is really, they are really going all the fields, meeting with people, so they could be hosts, they could be guests, doing some interviews, and trying to get those kind of qualitative feedback to answer the question. And it's a very good question. Like we didn't talk about research, but we spend a lot of time working with research on problems. And often I feel like the only quantitative aspect is not going to answer all your questions. And you need some kind of collaboration between the two of research. So yeah.
It's the user test person, kind of.
Yeah, but it's also, it's user test. It's like, you can have a feature ready, but it could be also about like the research phase. Like, how do you think about, this problem? Like, what do people think about, I did like a research project on like, like on families, for instance, recently. So we were like, meeting with families, like, and realize things such as like, when you have family, like you don't want anything in a flat, because like if you have small children, they're going to destroy the flat, right? And so we didn't realize this, but I mean, like you don't want any precious furniture or that kind of stuff. So this kind of insight you get from the field. Yeah.
Just one last question. You showed that most people were using R and Python. Yeah. Was there a third language?
Yeah, so we use we use many different languages. Another language we use a lot is Spark. So Spark for like so our pricing algorithm, for instance, is in Spark. What else? Yeah, I'm sure like some people are using Julia, like pretty advanced like stuff. We have also many functional programmers at Airbnb. So interesting OCaml. It's kind of a new interesting languages. I personally use R and Python, but I think it's pretty solid. So why keeping one platform instead of like fewer platforms? Why doing fewer platforms? Like I would say, like why breaking down into smaller platforms? I actually think like the power of like this marketplace is being global. Right? It's being like to be able for anybody to go from anywhere. Like if you think about it, it's like then today maybe you're going to go in New York, but then tomorrow you're going to go to Lisbon or you're going to go in Seychelles, and so maybe you are going to have like different location. And I'm not sure like if I understand like the.
Imagine I want to travel the world, so Airbnb will make my travel.
Yeah. So this is different. So this is like more advices for you to travel. So this is a big part of the product I quickly touch around like the guidebooks. So when I joined Airbnb, so about 2 years ago, we started on a project. There was a hackathon. So we do like 2 times a year we do a hackathon, and it's super exciting because and a hackathon is pretty high profile because when you do a hackathon, at the end you're presenting to Brian Chesky, so the CEO, you're just like in very cool situation, and we did a hackathon on like the guidebooks, right? And so what we did is we took all the data from hosts that were advising some places on their neighborhood. So, for instance, I am a host actually, so I have a listing nearby. And so when a guest, would come in my listing, I would let like a list of like all the cool places, like, go to du Pain des Idées, which is like my favorite, bakery, like in Paris, etc. And so this data, we have it in the product because we have actually this kind of a guidebook like inside the product. And if you just like count the number of places recommended by hosts that actually live in the city, well, the ranking you get is actually very accurate. And this is actually the kind of ranking you want to get, because this is not the kind of ranking you have on TripAdvisor, for instance, where this is like mostly tourists that are ranking the different places. So all to say that I think we have a unique position to recommend a lot of places and to be able to provide the kind of unique, personalized recommendation for your trip. This is not what we do right now. We recommend like places, but like in the future, definitely. So this is definitely like a recommendation is part of what we are building. I think you are fed up listening to me. Should we get beers? No, Edouard?
Yeah. Okay. So thank you again, Martin, for your time.
Sure.